welcome to the Outer Limits of Inner Truth Radio Show. I'm your host, Ryan. Can you imagine if I started the show out like this? You guys would be faster asleep than my wife would be as soon as she asks me how my day is. And I go, and she's, forget about it. No. We got a pretty interesting show tonight. Our featured guest has several different areas of skill and evolution, development, mainly focuses on the inner journey. I'm not going to talk too much. Let us begin tonight's show. Joining us now is Miss Shawna Allard. She is a spiritual counselor and a psychic, and she's also author of a great book. It's called Knowing. The Answers Are Within. You can learn more about Miss Allard by going to her website at divineknowing.com. Miss Allard, welcome to the program. Thank you for being with us today.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you. So I've already given Miss Allard some post-traumatic stress disorder because before the show I told her that, there's a meteor apparently going to hit the Earth and to pray that it would hit the Earth. So that's how we start things off. That's why we're getting a limited number of guests coming on this show recently. But hopefully we can turn it around and bring it to the positive. Miss Allard, can you please tell us a little bit about your background and when you knew you were psychic and how that it kind of completely changed your life?
All right. That's a whole big, long question. I always thought I was normal, and I think that intuition is normal. And growing up with intuition to me was, isn't everybody else doing this? So it wasn't until I was about 9 years old and I overheard some of my family members talking about Kirlian photography and how some people could see the aura and how that was colors of lights around people's heads and so forth. And that's when it struck me that they were talking about something I took as an everyday normal, to see the colors around someone's head was just the same as seeing their eye color or their hair. And all of a sudden dawned on me that I must be what they were calling some people. And that was the beginning of it. I had some other experiences. I thought that the train was going to jump the tracks when I was a Girl Scout and we were going up to Santa Barbara. Everyone assured me that doesn't happen. But ironically or intuitively, perhaps, the train did jump the tracks, not on the train I was on my way to Santa Barbara, but right before it got to the station to pick us up to go home in Santa Barbara. So intuition like that started happening, and it became evident that I was kind of picking up things that other people weren't.
Wow. So did you ever utilize that to, let's say, gain a competitive advantage in school? Like, hypothetically thinking if you're taking a test, you're like, is it A, B, or C? And you're like, I'm just going to use my intuition and just, let all the answers kind of be highlighted on there. I'm just curious because that's the first thing I would do.
Well, yeah, if I had thought about it, where were you back then?
Yeah. I don't know.
I think
I was always getting people in
idea.
trouble.
I probably did use intuition without really realizing that's what I was doing. Because when you don't know the answer for sure, you make an educated guess or an intuitive guess. So I'm sure I did use it. I just wasn't aware.
Got it. And so you realize that according to what you're learning is that you have this special gift. Now, when you realize that you have this special gift, what is your first feeling to do with it? Do you want to help people? Do you want to understand it more? Were you afraid about it? How did it really start to shape your perception about the nature of your perspective, where you were in this reality?
Okay. Well, originally, it didn't make any difference to me at all. It was just part of life. And I didn't think about using it or not using it. I asked my mother at one point, am I weird? Is this different? And she said, no, it's just like a muscle in your leg. If it's strong, you can do more. If it's weak, you can't. Use it and it'll get stronger. And she made it very simple. So that's my opinion of intuition. And then in my early 30s, through a really rough time and a lot of prayer, I had an awakening that made everything quite different. I went from just being intuitive to being actually a channel for the divine message and was able to hear and see and just know things at such a much deeper level.
So what was this experience? What happened?
Well, I was a couple months pregnant and found out my husband didn't want to be a father. Yeah, and he didn't want to be around. He just wanted to be an only child of mine, sort of. And so not really knowing where to turn or what to do, my source was to pray and ask for guidance. And, of course, I grew up in the Methodist Church believing that if you ask, you shall receive, right? Well, I asked for guidance and I asked for help, but I didn't expect a booming voice inside my head and full-blown visions. So I got more than I anticipated in terms of answers, and the answers weren't always what I thought would have been the answer that would have come to me from Spirit. But I began
What were some of these answers? What were some of the toughest answers that you... And also, when you were asking these things, were you fully prepared to be as open as you could to embrace everything? So did you already have it in your mindset that no matter what the answers were ahead of time that you were going to embrace them?
Yes, I did. Yes, I can say that I did. I was simply looking for divine guidance, and I was really open to whatever, because it seemed like a no-win situation, an absolute impossibility in my world at the time, that there was no good answer. So I was wide open, and I didn't expect the answer to be, get divorced. He's abusive. And when you're living in something, I think this is something that many women and probably men as well can relate to. If you're being abused, you probably have a good chance of not really realizing it at first, because you marry into that and it's very subtle. And if you understood in the very first place, you wouldn't be marrying into abuse. So it took a while for that to settle in.
When you were having this communication,
mm-hmm.
Can you please describe the communication? What I want everyone who's listening out there is to kind of visualize this for a second. So when you're giving your answer, I'd like to have our listeners visualize it, because I want to see if it'll resonate with them about how they are receiving communication. Because I think sometimes people, when they meditate or when they ask for guidance, it kind of comes in all different forms. So how did the communication come to you?
Okay. It absolutely does come in all different forms, depending on the individual. And I've been gifted in a few different ways, but this particular transmission at this time came through very auditory. And it came through so loud that I opened my eyes suddenly. I felt like the whole world must have heard it, because it was so loud, just booming loud, but it was inside my head. And it wasn't the same as an intuitive knowing. It was verbiage that I literally heard spoken. It was a male voice, which was probably just my interpretation, I would guess. I don't think that our Creator is either male or female, but a combination. In any case, the
so you're in contact with the Creator. You know what? One thing I was reading down your list, I have to say, it's pretty cool. If you go to divineknowing.com, you look at other services, and you've got all these different things. And so it's like you're just not going to communicate messages between people who've died. You do past life readings, tarot readings. You're a clinical hypnotherapist, spiritual counseling, Reiki Masters. I mean, this is fantastic. It's like you're like an all-in-one metaphysical store. This is great. I mean,
once you're this tuned into Spirit for 30 years, intuition coming through to guide people through their healing path or counseling or reading is really all the same source channeling through me.
Got it. And when you're talking about channeling, you talk about, your channel for our source. All that it is, there's one mind, there's one source called God, which what you were describing is something that it resonates deeply with one of our most beloved guest that we've had on our show, Ms. Nancy Dennison, who had, I wouldn't call it near-death experience, but actual death experience where she died, merged in with Source, and she said that all we are different perspectives of Source. Now, I am trying to figure out a way to break out of Source, to become a source unto myself, to break away. Because I'm not a fan of Source. I want to break out and basically become my own source, and create a reality without this. Is there any possibility that we can do that? Is there a way out? And the reason why I bring it to your attention is this, is that if we look at the thoughts that are in our own mind, and we understand that these thoughts, they originate from us and we are conscious. So these thoughts, I believe, are conscious. And if these thoughts no longer wish to be bound by the energy that we give to them, I'd be more than happy to set them free and let them have their own existence. So do we have the option? Is there a capability of us breaking away from Source, becoming our own existence without having to worry about, quote-unquote, being bound by Source's divine will or divine order? Because I have to tell you, I'm not a fan of that whatsoever.
All right. Well, all you have to do is be aware that you are, in fact, Source.
Okay.
You are, in fact, Source. We are each and every one Source. But we're also of Source, and Source is of us. So it would be very much like saying, how do I separate myself from the air? You are the air. It's inside of you. It's in between all the hard particles of you is space and energy. And so that is who you are. It's the consciousness of being aware that that's who you are that separates the gurus and the enlightened ones, the ones who have become self-realized, are the ones that understand that they are, in fact, God.
Okay.
They are individualized.
But if they are part of it, then I look at it this way. If I look at myself from a human perspective and I look at my mind and I have a series of thoughts, there are some thoughts that I enjoy. There are some thoughts that I don't particularly want to give any much attention to, yet they are part of me. So I would like to discard them. So what I'm saying is that if we believe that we are, quote-unquote, all part of Source, how do we, from an individual perspective, discard the stuff that we're not particularly a fan of? Can we just flush it out in some way? Because I feel like we are on a reality, from one perspective, the human perspective. We have other human perspectives that are probably not in alignment to our perspective. So how do we change and get rid of the perspectives we don't agree with and have our own perspective without those other human-like perspectives infringing upon us? Is there a possibility? That's why I want to break out. That's why I want to become maybe a friend of Source, but not exactly become one with Source.
I like how you put that, a friend of Source.
Yeah.
Maybe
that's buddies, but not living next door, having them live across town.
Well, you're wanting your own free will, if I understand it.
Oh, not only free will, but I want to become like the Source where I have my own universe. I don't want to be worshipped, but I'm not going to I'm going to have a universe where there's going to be peace. There's not going to be any killing. More people can evolve in which way they come to please, but there's not going to be any of this cruelty to people, cruelty to animals. That's going to be my thing, and I think that we could have that. I think all of us that want it can have it. I think we all have the. I wish we could figure out a way that we could all become sources onto our own. Because if there's one divine existence, then isn't this existence lonely? It should have other people, other sources, and also sources that it can compete with to become a better source. Because I think the reason why things are bad is because it's got no competition. That's why I feel the mediocrity is in this world.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. I really believe that people can determine their own universe and have a universe of their own. And it comes from, in my perspective, let me say, is through meditation. When I'm meditating, I am the creator of my world, and I am the experiencer of just the divine, and that's it. And because I meditate several times a day, and my husband meditates with me, we've created an energy vortex, I would say, in our home and in our friends' relationships. Yes, in the world around us, there is chaos, and there's some things that I would love to change. But they first change by our personal perspective, our personal universe, our vibration, our connectedness. So I believe you can do that. If everyone wanted what you and I wanted in that sense, we would have that peaceful world.
I don't know if we're going to have it. I always hear these things that, okay, apparently we're incarnating into Earth in order to learn certain lessons and all this. And I don't know. I just don't believe it. I just refuse to accept the fact that pain is necessary, that we could have pleasure all the time, and that we're in human bodies, that there's so many more options that we can have in these bodies to have pleasurable experiences, and that pain is absolutely unnecessary. Or at least I don't want it at all. And if it happens to me, I'm not going to look at it and say, well, this is part of my divine plan. I'm like, no, this is ridiculous. And I'm trying to do whatever I can. I'm telling you, I really want to try to find the answers and try to empower people so we could take this power back. I feel like maybe somewhere along the lines we lost that, or we believe that for some reason our life has to be dictated by a being that we don't see or a being that we don't know. So from your perspective...
I don't believe that. I really believe that we can control our lives, but it starts with controlling our thinking and our mind. The words in our heads are the power to create everything. And we tend to, all of us, have negative thoughts. And to guard against that or to rise above that is to control your universe to be more peaceful and positive. And it's the core to manifesting and aligning with your good and your dreams is when you can be in harmony with only those divine, beautiful thoughts that you're talking about.
So how do you do it? How do you see you meditate? And I'll give you a lot of credit. I wish I had the patience to meditate. I don't have the patience to play one hole of golf without going nuts. I don't have the patience. I try to meditate. It's difficult for me. So is there any other way to access that information without going to a meditative state?
Well, meditation is hard for everyone, Ryan. I think it's just not easy. But with practice, it gets easier. And what you're really doing is putting your mind in it's learning a different habit pattern for your mind. Rather than be out golfing and thinking a million thoughts, you might be sitting still in a forest and just having empty thoughts. And that's something just really hard for most humans to comprehend, that you could have no thoughts.
Yeah, how do you sit there? I don't know. We've had some really incredible guests on our program. One of them is Gerald Salente. And Gerald is the founder of the Trends Research. And this guy's so sharp. And I'm like, what do you do? He's like, I meditate 45 minutes a day. I'm like, how do you sit there and blank out your mind? How is it possible? And as a spiritual counselor, what do you see are some of the challenges that most people are facing today that maybe they weren't facing 5 or 10 years ago?
Well, in my practice, I haven't experienced a huge shift in what people are experiencing today differently than 5, 10, or even 30 years ago when I began. Most people's core distress comes from a relationship they're having with themselves, with their core family, with not having the romance or the money that they want. But I would pare it down to frustration in their relationships with themselves, others, finances, or their own body health. And the frustration torments them when they feel that there's no good answer. A lot of people feel trapped in their circumstances, in their physical health, or trapped in their relationships. They want more, and they don't know how to get that, what decision to make or what shifts to make to make things turn around and be happier. And particularly, we all have relationships with our coworkers and our bosses and our family, friends. And when those relationships have tension, everyone suffers.
I know that some people will go to psychologists and they'll go to spiritual healers. And I want to just let people know that are out there that I guess that sometimes you feel the pressure to saying, well, it's either science or it's spiritual. I think, all means that you can do to improve yourself, I would say go for it. From your perspective, when you're working with someone, what are some of the indications that the issues and challenges they have are based on a metaphysical problem, not so much of a compounding psychological problem? So how do you tell the difference between, saying, look, you've got some stuff going on from a past life, or, it seems that you have some things that are happening based on what you've done in, a conscious reality based on logic. How do you tell the difference between those two?
All right. What I think you're asking is how can you tell if it's karma or something that developed over a past life? They've brought habitual problem or a way of seeing things forward from another life? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. Yes. If it is something that's rooted in something that's logical or is rooted in something that's metaphysical. Because sometimes a person may be tormented and they seem to have a happy childhood, but yet for some reason something will trigger them and there's no cause for it. So something like that.
In fact, I think most of us have that. And when we come in from a past life experience, our soul has not only experienced things, but we've made up a reality around it. We've reasoned around it, or we've created a belief system around it. And we come into this life oftentimes attracting things that will actually trigger those old patterns and belief systems. And it can be super helpful to shine the light on that. It's like shining the light of awareness on a particular pattern. Gee, I invite friends that really don't care about me, or something like that. It's just a reality. When you can shine the light of awareness on it, you can begin to change it. So it doesn't really matter whether it comes from this life or a past life, but it can be helpful when you can identify that you do have a need. No alcoholic ever cured alcoholism unless they first said, gee, I have a need to heal it.
Maybe some people don't recognize it. Maybe they're in pain. They don't recognize that they're in pain.
That's right. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you this about past lives because we talked to Nancy about it, Nancy Dennis, and then I talked to two great friends of our show, Jeff Casper and Jon Brindis, and when discussing with Nancy, she's like, okay, well, when you die, you have this past life review, and then you learn everything that happened or how all your actions affected other people. You experience all the pain and pleasure that you inflicted upon another person. And then she says, then she's like, okay, well, apparently that's case closed. Because you experience everything. There's all justice served. And then when I talked to Jeff and Yona, they're like, well, you could be carrying things from other lifetimes that you have not resolved. So I'm wondering what your perspective is on it. Do we leave each lifetime with a sense of non-completeness despite the fact of having a past life review? And even if you do experience all the karmic debt from what you've accrued in that particular lifetime, how is it possible for that debt to follow you to another lifetime unless you maybe flat out said, yeah, I want this, despite the fact that you already experienced the full ramifications of your actions in that past life review?
Okay. It might be helpful to see it as not certain lives, but a continuum of one soul. And so it might be comparative to today, if you have a problem, and at the end of the day you review it and say, perhaps I could have handled it differently. Then you go into tomorrow, which could be another life if you're looking at it that way, and determined to handle it differently. But, we are habitual beings. A lot of us will repeat patterns, even when we don't mean to. And so it takes some time sometimes to learn and relearn new patterns. So yesterday you may review and decide to be different. Today you find that you're a little bit different, but maybe not so much. And past lives versus this life, it's a continuum of that one soul trying to just learn to evolve and get to a point where everything is good, where all things are creating a karma that's good, because karma is not necessarily just a bad thing. We create karma with every thought and every gesture that we make. We're creating a rebounding effect. It's like physics. If you push out and it bounces back.
Okay. From your perspective, you're looking at what's going on in the U.S. and the world. What is going on? Is it because I know the audience is going to – they're so tired. Like, God, stop talking about this, but I had to bring it up one more time. Because I'm like the cynical person. I always think the world's like barreling into the tyranny. I don't know. Maybe it's going to be hopeful. I always like to see if someone else can shed a positive light on it, but I don't know. What are your thoughts? Where's the world headed right now on a global karmic level, from your perspective?
On a global karmic level, believe it or not, we are coming out of a spiritual dark age.
Really? We're coming out of it? We're not barreling towards it right now?
Well, it certainly looks like we're barreling towards it.
I think we're free falling towards it, yeah.
It looks like it.
I feel like the glory days were the 80s when it was just enough technology. We didn't have the cell phones. We had Pac-Man. That was perfect. The cell phone technology and the spying stuff. So I'm open. So,
well, if you look out your window right now, the trees look dead because it's the middle of winter.
Yes.
And they look like dead sticks. But we know that there's life there and it'll bloom again in the spring. And this is what I see with the spiritual energy. We are, in fact, in a rebirthing of a much more spiritually aware consciousness in each individual person and in the people. Well, if you look at the amount of people in service to others compared to many years ago, there's a lot of more intuition and caring and healing, and this is the trend of businesses. And this is because this is what people want. Yes, we see parts of the world and right in front of our noses, things falling apart. But to me, it's very much like a tree in winter. It may look dead, but there's a lot of beauty blooming on the inside. And we're in a spiritual awakening.
I have to look on more of the beauty.
It's hard to see the beauty when you look at the news, for example.
Yeah. You know what? I grew up, I was Irish Italian, and I'm accustomed to people answering the phone, not saying hello, but what's wrong? What's going on? Who died? What's wrong? And I think that it's so embedded in my subconscious, because even when the phone rings, I just assume it's like the worst piece of news in the world. I don't know. I think I do need to see a shrink eventually. But let's go on with you, because there's so much more great things you offer. One of them is house clearing. I love this. You're talking about saying that you provide a service where you're able to help kind of clear out the home, bring peace. And every time I go into a house or a hotel, I generally bring sage, and I sage it out because I am not dealing with other visitors that are not in the physical reality. So how do you clear out a house, and what are some of the indications that you may have a presence there that is rather unwelcome?
Okay. Most people, if they have a presence, they're aware of it. And I get a lot of phone calls from people that are aware of a presence. I also get phone calls from people that have just gone through divorce and booted out a bad partner or meanie, someone in their life that's been vicious to them, and they want to start over with peace. Also, sometimes just a new home, like you have talked about with being in a hotel room. Same thing if you buy a new home. You really don't want to inherit the energy of everybody else. That's why we go in and paint and change carpet. We want it to look fresh, but we also want the energy to be fresh. So it's very important to have someone come in, sage the place. There are many techniques that we can use depending on what kind of stress or trauma has taken place. Usually there's only a room or two that has a leftover, I would call it like debris, and we get the garbage out.
Okay. And did you sage? Do you use lavender? How do you get the energy out? And what if the energy is so negative that it's not going away? Because I watch this show once in a blue moon. It's called Hauntings. And it's always about these families. They're always like, well, something happened. And they wait until the shadow's pulling them out of the wall into the basement. Like, I would have left the second the book fell off the shelf, even if it wasn't anything. I am out the door. I don't need to stay in the house that bad. But they just stay.
I agree with you. If a house is that bad, I'm out of there. But typically it is not haunted. And if it is usually not a spirit that means any ill good to the family that's there. And a lot of times we can find out who it is and how to make peace. And if it is an entity that's unhappy, then we want to help that entity get on its way as well. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Well, I don't care about the entity getting in its way. If there's a spirit and it's like, I'm like, go ahead, stay there, go ahead. I'm not the person. I don't want to become friends with the entity. I don't want to connect with the entity because I don't want it to follow me. I don't need friends that are like not in the physical reality. I know some people are like all cool with having ghosts. I'm friends with the ghosts. I don't want that. I don't need that.
I'll give you an example here of what can be a haunting that can also be very livable. I was called many years ago to John Wayne's boat, and I didn't know that that's the boat I would be visiting, but I was being called to investigate some haunting kind of energies, some strange goings-on. And when I got about halfway there on the freeway, I had just a tremendously beautiful smell of tobacco. And I'm not a smoker, but it's that smell of fresh tobacco, similar to opening a can of coffee. You know, it smells really good. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? I have every window in the car is up, and this is not a smell of mine. Very fascinating. Must be my first clue. When I got to the boat, to the main salon, it smelled of the same tobacco. And there were problems on the boat, but nothing serious. The boat had been purchased by a company that wanted to book it out for parties. And the boat would untie its mooring, or had untied its mooring, traveled against the current, and reparked itself in the old slip of John Wayne's old house in Newport Beach. And the lights would come on at random times, and they just had some goofy things going on. Well, I don't think they minded that it was a little bit inhabited.
Really?
Because it wasn't really causing problems.
Oh, well, good.
But they did,
people.
You know, but they did want to know. In a way, it's entertaining. But if it's going on in your house, not so good.
No. I mean, I don't like it anyone else in my house besides my family. I have to say, it's like right now, because people are listening, and I know some of you have come to my house, but I like having you over, but not for very long. Like 10 minutes is good. Anything beyond that, and I'm like, oh my God, get to the stage.
And nobody wants a ghost they can't see.
Get the stage. Yeah.
But as far as house clearing, what it usually is just purifying the energy. If there's been a lot of drama, a divorce, a death, or if you've moved into a new home, it's just nice to get the energy cleared away and start fresh. So it's really more about that. But there are hauntings.
Oh.
Most of them are friendly.
I don't want to have any hauntings. If anyone's
Okay.
being, actually, you know, if anyone's being haunted right now, there's enough about me. But what about if somebody's being haunted? What can they do to stop that? Is there anything that you recommend to get the ghost out?
Yeah, they can call 800-KNOWING, and I can help them. I do the house calls, but I also do some of it over the phone, or I would say energetically would make it more clear. Just the same as there's really no time and space between you and I, and we can do healings through the distance. We can also do healings and clearings on homes through the distance.
And you have another thing. It's called Feng Shui. And I think this is awesome because I used to do this, and I have to recheck and see if my office is set about this. But how important is it for you to have things arranged in your house in a certain way? What does that mean as far as the flow of energy? And can that actually have an impact on how quickly you're able to manifest things?
Well, I have a couple of answers for that. There is a bagua, which is simply a map that is used by Feng Shui. In one discipline for Feng Shui uses just the map. And the map would mean, for example, that the back right-hand corner of your home would be the relationship corner, and you would doll it up according to what you're trying to manifest in relationship. Because there has been so much belief and superstition around that for, forever, depending on the culture, there's some energy about it. You have group consciousness behind that thinking. But what I prefer is if you choose any spot in your home to be a visual for anything you want to manifest, just like a dream board or a goals board that people would make, yes, it helps you manifest because it keeps your consciousness upon your goal. And you've chosen to make it, front and center in that part of your home. You've decided, and now you're implementing it in a physical reality. So yes, it can help you manifest. I don't believe everything in Feng Shui is necessary. A lot of it is superstition, But when everyone believes in a superstition, or if you believe strongly in a superstition, it'll work.
So basically, if you believe in a rabbit's foot, if you give your time and energy, it'll manifest. So I guess I'm wondering, if a person really believes wholeheartedly that they can defy gravity, is there any possibility that can actually happen?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
There's many meditators that float above the floor. They're defying gravity, right?
I've never seen anyone float, but I want to defy gravity. I want to learn about telekinesis because, I like to sit on the couch and I don't like to have to get up and get a beer. So I want to be able to focus that and be able to pull the beers right out of the fridge. That's what I would use my power for. Not helping the world.
That's certainly a very big dream.
It's definitely a big thing.
I have a feeling that those that are able to levitate are probably foregoing alcohol. So there's just that conflict.
Really? I've heard about this before because sometimes I say, if you take drugs, you take alcohol, you're going to lower the vibration. But it's like, but if you take drugs or alcohol and you're happy around people and people become more tolerable, wouldn't that raise your vibration in one way?
Yes, I think in some ways it can. Especially the way you said, if you're more tolerable and enjoyable, it's going to raise the people you attract a little bit. Yes.
In your experience as psychic, what was the most challenging client that you had? Did you ever have somebody that was a skeptic that really kind of pushed you and even hurt you? And from that experience, what did you learn from it? And how did you take the experience, knowledge you learned, and apply it to the future?
Well, I am very sensitive, and I want everyone that comes to see me to be just so happy. Obviously, that's what I want for them. But I have to give them the truth. And sometimes people just argue with me as if I can change the truth. And I predict the truth, or I can help them be aware of things, but I don't make them happen for people. And so I did have a man from New York. He had moved there, and he was determined that another psychic, a different psychic, had told him he should be famous. So he called me quite frequently for a while, telling me that he should be famous. And he wanted to know what was wrong.
Well, he's asking you, what's wrong? Why am I not famous? I'm like, are you a Kardashian? No. You're not. That's right.
Yeah, so my guidance came through, things that he could do. But essentially, the feeling with him was he was entitled to this. And he wanted me to tell him why it wasn't happening. And he also wanted me to acknowledge that you're so very entitled. We've made some sort of cosmic mistake. And so that kind of arguing is a little bit tough to handle.
Wow.
I can just tell you where you're at. I can't tell you why it hasn't happened for you.
So when you talk to someone, you read someone, what are some of the things you pull out about a person? Do you look at the person and you say, okay, well, based on what I can tell about you, I see this in your field. I see you have some karmic ties. I see this is where you're going. Like, what are some of when you're talking to someone, what are the first couple of things that kind of pop out at you right away?
Well, first of all, the kinds of psychic readings that I do, I don't just list off a bunch of predictions. I really love for people to ask questions, and a lot of questions are very different. So someone comes in and says, is my spouse cheating? And then Spirit will say yes or no, or if this is a pattern, if this relationship can be saved. It helps the person asking to know, am I crazy? Am I feeling that there's an affair going on when there is not? Or is there an affair going on and I'm justified in the thinking I'm having? Because often the spouse will deny it. So it comes from what's their heart's desire. Should I change jobs? And Spirit will, or the reading will say, well, if you stay in this job, Here's how it goes, and if you change jobs, here's what's in store for you. Here's what's available to you. And those are my favorite kind of readings, to give people, help them with choices.
If I was
choices are difficult.
If I was in your position, I think one of the questions that I would really struggle with, if somebody asked me and I said, "What am I on the right path of my evolutionary goal and progress?" I mean, at that point, I mean, I don't know. I guess it would scramble my circuits, but maybe you can answer this. If somebody asks you that question, how do you answer that? I mean, do you look at all their life experiences as part of their greater evolution? Can a person be on a path that is not alignment at all to what they came here to learn? And if so, if they are going far off that path from what their true purpose is in this lifetime, is it necessarily a bad thing? So how would you answer that particular question if somebody asked you that?
Okay. I get asked that a lot, quite a bit. And what I have, and first of all, I'm not necessarily saying I'm actually channeling a connected energy through me. And quite frequently what they will say is, look at your feet. Wherever those feet are, that is your path. You're on your path. You can't be not on your path. And it's your interpretation of what's going on with you that allows you to go on to better, better, best, or really fall into despair. As far as being in integrity with what we came to do in this lifetime, not everyone is there, but I believe everyone has a path to get there. For example, when I was young, it never occurred to me to be an intuitive helping others. I wanted to be a teacher, and I knew I wanted to be a teacher. Well, ironically, now I'm a teacher, but just certainly not in the classroom the way I had interpreted it. So a lot of guidance comes through to help people incorporate their gifts and their passions into a reality where they're using their maximum gifts in a way that gives them joy. So I would say if you're going to work every day and you're loving what you do, it feels rewarding, it feels that others are benefited by your existence, you're on a great path.
But what if, psychologically speaking, you are a sociopath? Have you ever read someone and you ask them to go, "Hey, how's work going?" "Well, I'm having a great time." "Well, what do you do?" "Well, I shoot people, or something's wrong with me." That's the thing. I guess it's the X factor. How are you able to provide advice for a person who's incapable of incapable of not recognizing the shortcomings within themselves? How do you provide guidance to someone like that, or how do we be able to provide guidance into a person who refuses to accept new information beyond what their core belief patterns are? I talk about it a lot with the cognitive dissonance, which means that they cannot embrace new information, and they're always going to stay within their bubble.
Mostly that kind of person would not call an intuitive because they don't want to know. But I do occasionally come across someone of that behavior or of that belief and mindset, and I have a catalog of wonderful psychiatrists and psychologists. Actually, ironically, probably my biggest client base is from people in that field.
The psychologists?
Psychologists and psychiatrists probably are a greater number of my clientele than any other profession. But I find that in the reading I'll know which one to pair them up with and what their situation is. And so I don't try to treat a clinical disease like that. I transfer them to someone that I know can help them.
Excellent. Well, Shawna Allard, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. And let's just remind everyone that Shawna has a phenomenal book called Knowing. And if you go on Amazon, it's got 100% 5-star reviews. So it obviously resonated deeply with people. It's fantastic. You can learn more about Ms. Allard by going to her website at divineknowing.com. Again, some of the services she provides are, tarot readings, past life readings, channeling spirit guides, getting in touch with your spirit guides, facilitating communications with people across over. And apparently she also does pizza delivery. I'm kidding, she doesn't do that. But a lot of other great services. Ms. Allard, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Ryan.
Okay, everyone, that concludes today's edition of the Outer Limits Living the Truth radio show. Special thanks to our great guest, Miss Shawna Allard, and special thanks, as always, to the Outer Limits Living the Truth radio show virtues, Miss Carrie O'Connor, Miss Lisa Kaza, and Miss Constance Stellis. To learn more about the Outer Limits Living the Truth radio show, please go to our website at outerlimitsradio.com. So the next time we meet, my friends, wishing upon you an abundance of peace, love, and fears. Take good care. Thank you so much for listening.
Want to be heard or seen in front of millions of people? Want to be an expert on TV or radio? Goldman McCormick PR is a New York City-based public relations agency that specializes in traditional and social media placement for law, finance, media, and corporate-based clients. Goldman McCormick PR also are specialists in website development, radio show creation, press conferences, media training, and so much more. Check out GoldmanMcCormick.com for more information. GoldmanMcCormick.com.